Thank you for reading that whole introduction, because as I sit here through this whole day and I wonder what is it that I might have to add here, and it does occur to me that what I have to add is really that perspective of the trustee company, which many people may think has very large thick oak doors and not much new penetrates. But I am actually here to assure you that this has been on our agenda for a number of years. I think Kylie Charlton first walked into our offices about 4 years ago, and we have been talking about this on and off ever since. And we have been particularly frustrated about the rather thin dialogue that has been coming through in the media around this. And so started our own internal conversations and started thinking about this much more deeply. Because we think we have a role in the whole sector to be part of this development, because only by being part of it will we actually participate sooner rather than later. And I think also that because we currently advise over 100 living donors, and we help people set up their own private ancillary funds or become part of public ancillary funds, it's also important that we can respond to what those new philanthropists might be thinking about. Which button is it on this? Next. The other green one. Not working. Sorry. There are three things that I agreed to cover. Oh, thank you. It's just taken a little while. Thank you. There are three things I agreed to cover today, whether are they a financing mechanism for charities or a new way of doing business? Secondly, how will the infrastructure be formed, and what will the investors require in terms of measurement? And a lot of this has been covered, so I won't be going through it in detail. I did also want to mention that apart from this thinking around social impact bonds, which hearteningly, our board of directors asked me a couple of weeks ago for a presentation to them about what all of this means and how it works, which shows the depth of interest. We also, a few years ago, looked at one of our trusts, looked at whether there was a way of leveraging the capital of that trust, which was dedicated to social housing, and found that we were able to actually go into a whole new model of delivery by leveraging a quarter of that portfolio, working with a registered housing provider and going into a partnership with the Office of Housing in Victoria to get a lot more capital and a lot better services and housing developed for the people we were looking after. So we're also interested very broadly in any kind of transformation that we can deliver in our trust that's positive. A lot of what I'm also saying is to do with some of the charities who, as key stakeholders, we have regular conversations with, and we have held conversations around the topic of SIBs with some of the charities that we work with. And so a lot of our thinking comes from those conversations as well. So in order to talk about where we're coming from, I do want to put up some systems pictures. I know a couple of others today. David Hutchison put up a really good systems picture, and I think the gentleman from Cause was looking at this as well. But this is the way that we've been thinking about. And so I want to look at, say, the traditional way of charities doing business with government, future concept of how they can do this, and thirdly, what we would think is a much more effective way. So the first one is a fairly simple model, which I won't go through in a lot of detail, except most interestingly that everyone on that page has a similar risk profile. The second scenario is what we sort of imagined the social impact bonds would bring in terms of a system when we first started looking at it, which was really a kind of emerging stage. And whilst we didn't define at this stage whether there would be an intermediary between the government and the new investors and charities, it does seem from the way that things are developing that that is actually, from our perspective, a critical element. So the third scenario is really how we see a really effective system working. And I mean, obviously we've looked at the work of McKinsey and Company, and I've been really interested to hear what Social Finance UK has been doing, because I think it is important that an infrastructural broker is actually the one that builds and creates the product from the financial and social perspectives, that seeks investors, that raises capital and funds selected charity or charities to deliver the program. Whilst this hasn't been spoken about, there is some suggestion that, as things are going along, that depending how that independent evaluator is working with that charity, there may be opportunity to either bring in new charities into the mix or perhaps substitute the one that's currently working. That infrastructure broker would also select the independent auditor and would have the responsibility for overall stakeholder management and very broadly the SIBS project management. I do tend to agree that having various stakeholders that are really from different angles pushing for the success of the work that is being undertaken is much more likely to set up some good creative friction, to set up some really good clear resolution of issues that may seem irresolvable, and in general terms I think really enhance results. So our conclusion is that these social impact bonds are indeed a new way of doing business, and listening to people talking today, Sally, I think, was talking about this notion of sharpening their pencil as a result of participating in this in terms of program execution. The Minister was talking about a greater inclination for data share and support for transparency around program results. David was talking about that ability to work within firm boundaries but with freedom as being a different way of working with government for charities. And the Minister also talked about the social impact bond as being a means of driving innovation. And whilst I don't imagine that that is within that particular project, but it is within the entire system, knowing that future innovations that you may design can be financed, or a way can be financed to fund those innovations, actually does enhance innovation. So finally, in terms of questions for evaluation, simply put, another reason to have intermediaries, which may indeed arise out of the work that charities are doing in pilot stages, but having intermediaries means that measures that are designed are potentially applicable across various bond investments over time, so that investors don't have to kind of relearn the whole game in order to understand how these measures and how these products work. Secondly, measures have to intuitively make sense. You can't present a measure to an investor that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the group that you're trying to assist. And thirdly, they must be transparent. That one came from our investment people, so you can imagine what that they might be used to. And also things that are easy to understand. So rather than thinking about how can we measure something simply, you don't measure it simply, but you explain it simply once it has been measured. So overall, our perspective at this stage is that these pilots are really important. If I was to say how might we play a role, I think today has helped me to supporting charities who are looking in this space and perhaps wanting to develop pilots that might be suitable for SIBs, and also to support intermediary organisations to build the skill sets that they need. I think also that over time this whole thing needs to be looked at as a system, because originally it looked like we were building a product. We're actually building a system, and we have to be conscious about how we are building, designing and participating in that. It's clearly not something that is looking to make investors financially rich, and I think that has to be very clear up front. It's a more expensive model, probably, than many other models that can be designed, but if executed well, have that impact, and of course impact has cost. The other conclusion at the end of all of this is that the intermediaries will actually have enormous power and enormous clout, and I would imagine that the intermediaries is the group that is allocating the dividends across the participants inside of the social impact bond. I'm not assuming, I've heard all the things about how title that was, and that was from particularly from Jocelyn, and I really appreciate those case study perspectives. But I think everyone who's participating in this has to have an opportunity to have a part of that dividend. And so that intermediary and how they engage and how they determine that is also going to be very important. So thank you.